After a while, we can all get sick of a routine. For example, my dad is a cook, and I tried to buy him a knife for the holidays. Unsurprisingly, he said the last thing that he wants to see for the holidays is a fucking knife. And similarly, you might be wondering, is subtractive synthesis all there is? And the answer to that is obviously no. Today, we're going to check out a form of synthesis that's new to us, but is as old as oscillators themselves. FM synthesis. Stay tuned. Hey, I'm Michael Carrillo, aka Hex Spa. Welcome to my channel. Thank you to my long-term subscribers. If you're new, visit the description for an article and affiliate link for a tutorial so you can follow along. So FM synthesis has been around for as long as since you could patch two VCOs together. It's different from additive synthesis in that additive synthesis is about adding component partials to a sound directly. FM synthesis is about creating harmonic and inharmonic sidebands by using one oscillator to modulate the pitch of another at a fast rate. What popularized FM synthesis was the Yamaha DX7 in 1983. The DX7 had a unique architecture which was different from your standard subtractive synth in a few ways. Firstly, the 2 to 3 VCO section was replaced by 6 digital oscillators known as operators. This is where the Ableton operator synth gets its name. These operators could be patched together in a number of different combinations known as algorithms. If operator 1 was patched into operator 2 to modulate operator 2's pitch, then operator 1 is known as the modulator and operator 2 is known as the carrier. You can only hear carrier operators directly and modulator operators indirectly by the effect that they have on the carrier. Instead of one main amp envelope controlling the overall volume of a sound, each operator has its own amplitude envelope, including any carriers which would affect the amp envelope of whatever components of the sound that they're acting as. Primer, the synth in Syntorial, is using an older subtractive design where oscillator 2 is hardwired to oscillator 1 and the amount of FM is controlled with an FM amount knob. Instead of a dedicated amp envelope for oscillator 2, we'll be using the modulation attack decay envelope instead, which will be attached to the FM amount knob. The final detail is that the DX7 had no low-pass filter. Being the 80s, and this was digital, the low-pass filter probably would have sucked anyway. Besides, you don't really need one in FM synthesis because instead of starting with a harmonically rich wave like a sawtooth or a square, you're starting with a sine wave in most cases, particularly with the DX7. And when you modulate the carrier with the other operator, you're adding more harmonic content. So it acts almost like a reverse low-pass filter. A few notes about the group patches at the end. There will be FM and a sub-oscillator, and those tend to blend together, so listen for that. We'll also be listening for an FM attack transient on a lead sound, and we'll get into how to make an FM attack transient in the next section. There will also be unison for a little bit more punch, and there will be no filter envelope applied because we're using the FM amount knob being modulated by the modulation envelope. That's already enough modulation for this point in our journey. So we will be using the cutoff knob and assigning it to a frequency besides maxed out, but all the motion will be coming from the modulation envelope in terms of adding or subtracting frequencies. Let's get into some demonstrations. Alright guys, so today we're talking about FM synthesis, which is fun. It's been made famous by some of Skrillex's sounds around 2010, but don't doubt it, it's still being used all the time. And how it's working in Primer is oscillator 2 is the modulator and oscillator 1 is the carrier. So what does that mean? Well, in this case we're going to change it to sine to keep it simple. And what it means is whatever oscillator 1's frequency is, in this case I'm going to play C4, which is about 262 Hertz. If we start to use oscillator 2 to modulate this, it's going to change the frequency at that same rate. So we have oscillator 1 going this fast, and then we have this one changing that one's pitch at the same rate. So you can hear we always retain the fundamental of oscillator 1, but we get new overtones. Let's go down an octave. Okay, so fun fact, this was made popular by the Yamaha DX7 synthesizer in the 80s, digital synth, using sine waves, which are easier to create digitally. I'm under the impression that sine waves are actually a little bit more complex to create in the analog realm. But as the Keith McMillan website says, that FM has been going on since VCOs, voltage-controlled oscillators, basically analog modular oscillators, have existed. So this is an old technique, and it's just used in many different ways. Of course, you can use different waveforms for a more complex sound. It's basically the difference between this and AM synthesis, which you don't hear about as much, is whereas with a low enough frequency, oscillator 2 will create a tremolo effect with amplitude modulation. Basically, but with FM, it's going like you'd expect an LFO, which is low frequency oscillator. And obviously the difference between a LFO and a regular oscillator is just the speed at which it moves. And in fact, if you have a modular synth, you can definitely use an LFO to create frequency modulation or amplitude modulation, because it'll probably have a switch to go between low rates and high rates, just like I think Ableton's operator synth has. But yeah, really simple. Like I'm saying, in this case, we're using oscillator 1 as the carrier, which is the sound that you hear, and then oscillator 2 is the modulator. And then in FM synthesis, these oscillators would be known as operators. Okay, so we are dealing with sine waves. So just like with the triangle wave, we're going to probably get a tick at the front of our sound. Go higher. So we're going to bring up the amp envelope attack just a little bit to remove that. At 0 milliseconds, 2 milliseconds. 150, you're just getting a whole different sound. So let's decode some patches. Set the oscillators to sine. I'm pretty sure we're always bumping up this amp envelope when it comes to FM, but let's first get the FM blend correct. And let's go up an octave, couple octaves to hear if there's a tick. Yeah, hear how I got that digital kind of tick? You might want that, you might not. So that's something to consider. Okay, I can tell you right now that that's not a ton, because it's dark. Check for a tick. Once again, it doesn't sound like there's too much. Flip them over to sine. I'm going to guess more than the last one, and I'm going to assume that there's no tick. Yeah, can't hear. When you go really high, it's hard to hear the character of things. Obviously, when you bring it down to the lower octaves, you get more of that character. And then you come up. It's almost like you don't even hear a difference. So always check your synth patches in different octaves. You might discover neat sounds, you have one synth patch but so many octaves to work with that you can use the same patch, maybe not only for the bass but also for a lead. Okay, another dark one. Okay, a little bit more buzzy. He was saying that FM is kind of like ring modulation. I mean, was it ring or oscillator sync that you get kind of a metallic sound? I don't know. It sounds different to me. It is different. I'm sure he agrees that it's different, but he's just given the idea that, you know, we're warping the sound in a sort of dirty way. We're getting kind of a weird instability in the sound there, and I'm not sure why. Next little lesson. So what we're going to do is we got to set up our oscillator waveforms still. FM's turned up all the way. We always got to bump up the amp attack for now, just to remind us. And now we have the semi-knob. And just like before, that's going to transpose oscillator 2, which means that now the modulator is working at a different frequency and applying that to oscillator 1. So what he's saying is when it's down here at 0, which puts them at unison, you get a singular sound. But then as you bring up the semi-knob, you end up with this pure sine tone underneath, but then you have this other overtone, which may or may not be harmonically, you know, in a musical way related. So we're going to get some dissonant sounds. Let's check that out. I mean, that's a good example, because again, that's just what, like a half step apart. So of course that's going to be dissonant. Let's go to a major second. Let's go to a major third. Let's see what happens. Doesn't sound like a major third, but that's the interval. But we can still hear that undertone. Let's turn FM all the way down. It almost feels like it's getting pulled up, but it's not. It's like one of those parallel line optical illusions. So fun stuff. That's what we're going to do. We're going to leave all this stuff like that, and then we're just going to try to find the semi-knob. He says that, at least for Syntorial, we're going to stick to pretty sounds, but you can Skrillex it up all you want. You hear that howly sound on the top? Yeah, that's the 2-octave sound right there. It's nasty. Okay. Why we're getting some of that pitch instability, I'm not sure. I'm just going to keep playing the lower octaves, because that's what really reveals the character of these sounds. that fart. That's a really nice. Like, was he going Mission Impossible on us? Yeah, it's a nice bell sound. You know, normally I do ear training, but when you do, I do audio ear training and relative pitch, but when you're doing stuff like this, it's all wrapped up into one. Kind of another bell sound-ish. It's like a angry bell sound. Maybe not as sonorous as I thought. Okay, seems pretty basic. What? Is that it? Just nothing? Trick question? Joe is tricky like that. He likes to throw these in. The fact that we're getting that weird pitch instability is not helping. Sounds like you're tuning a radio, huh? I'm gonna go out on a hint, on a limb, and just say that, yeah, that's it. Okay, we can hear a clear separation there. So, how far is it? Yeah. You heard the tick, though? Can't have that. It's just such a hard sound. Nope, you're wrong. Okay, an octave and a fifth. Ah, I hit the next button on accident. Damn it. And he gives me a slow clap. I've done that before. Oh well. Okay, we're gonna try one that's not even the same as whatever. Let's see what's next. So what we're going to do now is set up our waveforms like always, keep mix at 1, and probably bring up the envelope attack just a little bit. And we're going to figure out the semi amount and the FM amount. He says it's going to require some trial and error. Shouldn't be that hard though, right? Because the less FM you have, the closer you are just to that pure sine. So I'm guessing it shouldn't be too hard. Okay, let's say it's about half. Maybe a little more. Yep. Okay, that's another dark one. Okay, that's a bright one. Brighter than I thought. Okay, somewhat dark. Oh, he's sticking to the consonant sounds. Another dark one. Another trick question. Just the bare minimum. Okay, that one's cranked. Oh, okay. Next we're going to put the mod envelope on. At this point in the program, what we're going to do is set up sine as per normal and introduce the mod envelope. So let's set everything up like we normally would and bring up FM some. Okay, so the mod envelope is assigned to nothing right now, but now we can assign it to FM amount. So it's going to turn this knob. Okay, obviously attack is going to raise it by this amount over this amount of time, and then there's no hold. It's just going to immediately proceed to the decay phase. So over 1000 milliseconds, it's going to go from here up this much and then come back down over 375 milliseconds. So somewhat slow attack, pretty quick release. Let's listen. Okay, that's all it's doing. Just basically going. Let's turn this off. Except smooth. So that's neat. The other example he gave was to create an attack transient on bass sounds. So with no mod envelope assigned, we bring up the FM from sine. He's saying that sounds almost like electric bass. I don't know. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. But if we put a little bit of attack on it, it's going to come up over 150 milliseconds, or I think he just turned out the decay. So instantly we're going to have some amount added to the FM, and then we're going to bring it back down. And then if we have it a little longer, he also brought it up, the modulator's octave, 2 octaves. And that's going to give us some more speaking range. I think he was cranking the amount a little more too. It's pretty cool. It's almost like some tropical sound. There you go. Okay. So another thing to keep in mind is that when we're using the mod envelope, the start and the end are wherever this FM knob amount is. So if we end up with that sound here at the end, that's our default sound after the mod envelope has done its work. So let's try to set that up, and then we'll add the mod envelope later. I don't know what it's tuned to. Okay. Okay, very bold. And yeah, and once we go high enough, we don't really hear much at all. Okay. Really getting into it now. Hmm. Sounds close. Probably need to bump that attack up a tad. Okay. Okay, I'm not hearing too much of an initial FM amount. Sounds like hell, man. It's crazy. And there it's all nice and soft and lo-fi. Yeah, like a rubber band. Cool sounds. Can't wait to dive more into FM, to be honest. You know, I've never opened FM8. I've used Operator. It's a pretty cool synth, but I'm not using Ableton right now. Maybe one day I'll get back into it, but yeah, FM I always thought was kind of fun. People say it's advanced, but is it really? Is it really any more advanced than regular subtractive synthesis? Just, you know, just because you're adding more opportunity to play with the oscillators. I mean, I don't know. Okay, I like these basic patches. Joe goes crazy sometimes, but I like the simple ones. I mean, you just listen to that all day, to be honest with you. I love that. All this basic buzzy sawtooths and stuff, that's fine, but I mean, man. You know, I guess everyone's going to have their own thing. I like those sounds. Okay, now we're getting into some longer ones. Some long. Whoa, that's long, huh? I wish this click would turn on, even though I don't hit play. No, it's got to be that. No. No, hell no. No. Okay, I think we got it. Let's turn this down a bit. No, that ain't got no shame. These longer ones I find to be a little bit more difficult because they take so much time. But I think we're pretty close here with this semi-knob, right? Close enough. I think it's quiz time. Yeah. FM is short for Free Michael. What does FM do to sound? It does add a metallic quality. Oscillator 2 is the modulator in this case. And it's not oscillator, it's operator. But hey. The carrier in primer is oscillator 1. Check your synth for details. When using FM, what should the value of the mix knob be? It should be 100% to oscillator 1 because it's the carrier and we're not hearing oscillator 2. It's working behind the scenes. What waveform is best suited for FM? It's arguable. Arguable. In this case, we're using sine. When using FM, which control determines the amount of metallic bite versus the amount of smooth sine? It's the FM amount, right? Because if we have the amount all the way down, we're just hearing the carrier. It's just a sine wave in this case. As we bring it up, we're getting more of the metallic bite. When using FM, which control determines how high in pitch the metallic FM quality is? And that would be Oscillator 2 Semi. All right, something to mention for these patches is he said that we're not going to be using the filter envelope, because when you use the mod envelope on FM, you already are creating like an envelope for the frequencies. And that's usually what the low pass or just a filter envelope will do. But with mod envelope, you know, as you attack, you're adding more frequencies, and as you decay, you're returning back to your baseline oscillator, or your baseline oscillator plus FM setting. In this case, it was 22. Let's listen to the patch. Okay, obviously there's LFO modulation on pitch, more than likely. It's monophonic, so with unison at least you can spread. You know, I'm not hearing a strong attack. It doesn't sound aggressive, so therefore I don't think it's unison. He did say that one of these patches will use unison, but I don't think, I'm sure that this one doesn't. Actually, I didn't check whether it's polyphonic or not. No, and it doesn't sound like there's any glide either, and the mod envelope isn't restarting, or it is restarting per note, so I know that legato mode is not turned on. The sub oscillator is turned on also. Let's listen to the sound without it. Pretty obvious. So yeah, the LFO was turned down, the rate was turned up, and I assigned it to the pitch of oscillator 1, because we can't hear oscillator 2. Otherwise, if we were to assign it to oscillator 2's pitch, it would sort of interact with the mod envelope here, giving that little whoosh sound in the beginning. That's in your bass range. It's more subtle in the higher range. But yeah, in the bass it's pretty obvious, I guess, because you just have more, it's hitting you where your ear is most sensitive. So I don't think I adjusted the volume, and this was turned up pretty fair amount. And I originally had the mod envelope set to the pitch of oscillator 2, I guess kind of like oscillator sync, which by now I've already forgotten how to set up. I think that's oscillator 2, so I think, yeah, for sync it'd be the semi, yeah, so I don't know. Anyway, the amp envelope release is turned up some. You can hear there's a tail, and obviously the reverb. So that was it. No filter that I know of, I don't think. Let's get a hint. Yeah. On to patch 2. With this patch, there was some unison. Let's listen to it. That's a bell sound, so automatically we have to set our oscillators to sine wave, at least for now. All this stuff, there's no sub oscillator. The FM is turned up just a little. You can only hear it at the end, and we know that there's going to be an FM. The FM amount is going to be modulated with the mod envelope for the attack. We just know because it's syntorial right now. There's no rise time. So it's just decay turned up halfway. That's what it ended up being. Believe me, I did have to experiment. No LFO. And the sustain is at 0. That's the first thing I noticed. Then I noticed that there's release, but there's also matching decay. So when you hold the key or release it, it's the same. It did turn out that there's polyphony, but I think only 3 voices of it. I feel like that 4th voice is stealing the bottom. So unison was 4 voices, and the thing that gave that away was the quietness of the carrier. You can hear that it's not very bassy. It's just a whole lot of attack. But turn unison off and match the volume. Well, now I'm kind of wondering. Yeah, maybe unison was off. Maybe just the volume. I guess that's almost the same if there's no spread or detune. But the thing that really got me was the bandpass filter. That's what gave the whole sound. If we turn this off, low pass, and put it back up, you hear how bassy that sound is. That's even if we turn it down. And that's what I was like, huh, I wonder what's going on here. So I'm gonna go ahead and just say unison is off because it sounds the same. I mean, if there's no detune and there's no spread, then what good is unison gonna do? It literally is just turning the volume up. So let's get a hint. Yep, good save. On to the next patch. All right, guys, this was pretty easy. Let's take a listen. You might be thinking, wait, is that a delay? I mean, that might be your initial impression. That certainly wasn't mine. I thought it was something with the amp envelope. Sometimes if you have amp envelopes with a zero sustain, but then some kind of release, it'll do that. You'll hold down the key, and then when you release, it'll sort of re-trigger. This one doesn't do that. And I was like, well, maybe it's LFO. You know, we got the restart button, so every time I hit the key, it'll re-trigger, and then somehow it'll restart the amp envelope using a sawtooth waveform, and you'll get that kind of effect sometimes. But no, just a simple delay with zero feedback, just one slap, and that's it. Obviously, we know that we're using FM, so just knowing that helps a lot, because if I didn't know that, I might be a little bit more lost. We definitely feel the weight of that sub oscillator. So indeed, we are using a triangle sub. Turn the amp envelope up a little bit. The release and the decay are matched at 515 milliseconds. FM is turned to about 2 o'clock. Pretty bright. If we go farther, it just gets brighter. Remember, it's almost like a low-pass filter, this FM amount, because the more you add, it's additive, right? Instead of subtractive, where you're starting with this and bringing it down, you're starting with this and bringing that in. It's a small but important distinction. And that's the patch. Let's get a hint. Yep. Next patch. All right, guys. This patch sounds like this. Pretty cool, pretty modern, very clean. Nice sharp attack on it. Lots of low end and a little bit of motion. You know, it's almost like your ideal bass. How is it made? It's FM, okay, with just a little bit of an amount. How do we know that? It's a dark sound. You hear that higher overtone? It's just dark. Minimum amount. Actually, there is no sub oscillator. We just don't need it. The unison is given a lot of weight. Well, it's thickening it. It's weighty enough just with the semi-knob turned up to an octave. I did need to use the amp, the mod envelope. Let's listen without it. You get the body, but you don't get the tick. Just a very small amount with a quick decay, 150 milliseconds. No other modulation, no spread, just detune on the unison to get the swirl. Pretty sure that's it. Turned up the amp envelope just a touch for no tick. And that should be the patch. Yep. Next patch. Okay, patch 5. Interestingly, to me almost sounds like a saw, but we know it isn't. So how do we do it? We left the semi at 0, and we brought the amount up to about 10 o'clock. And I just tapped the key, so we didn't hear this motion we're hearing, which is obviously not the filter envelope. It can only be the mod envelope. And this is a great example of almost like a filter envelope type effect not using the filter envelope. So just give a little tap, and that's what's going to let you know what the sound is before this mod envelope attack phase has done its work. See, it sounds like a filter's opening. Of course it does, because again, the more you're adding FM, the more it sounds like you're opening a low-pass filter. Except you have an FM sound underneath. And you know, you can combine them, but actually I think a lot of FM synths, true FM synths, don't have low-pass filters, now that I think about it. Joe didn't mention that, but I don't know if the DX7 actually had a low-pass filter. I don't think it does, because they don't actually need to, you know, if you really want to geek out on FM. So we hear that there is that mod envelope coming up at 150 milliseconds. Giving that little bit of whoosh. We still have to get rid of the tick, so I brought up the amp envelope to 2 milliseconds, and then the release of the mod envelope is at 1.8 seconds. 1890 milliseconds to a full amount. But it comes up so fast, and then it starts to decay, so it doesn't really sound too bright. But it does enough to give that sort of saw or even narrow pulse sound. Unison, again, is on. Detune halfway. That's what's given the sort of warble. I thought it might be chorus, but no, chorus is going to give us width, and we didn't get any width. Oh, and there's delay. And there's no spread on that delay, I don't believe. Let's listen in stereo. No. So no spread on the delay, just mixed in again at 10 o'clock, and then the feedback at, what time is that? 9 o'clock. Pretty much it. Let's get a hint. That's all there was. Let's do the final patch. Hi guys, this is a great sound. You just listen to that forever. Very mechanical and ambient. So it's got spread on it. You can hear if you're listening on headphones or stereo speakers. It's wide. So that indicates to me that it's likely chorus. It's also somewhat soft and pushed back, and chorus is going to do that too. Let's listen without chorus. Hear how chorus pushes it back? And that's because chorus, like I mentioned in the chorus lesson, click the link, it adds a copy of itself. So in the acoustic realm, you're only going to hear a copy of something if the direct sound hits a surface, and then that second sound gets to your ears within 20 milliseconds or so. Otherwise, it'll sound like a separate sound. But since it is a copy of itself, you could probably delay it more than 20 seconds and still have it sound further away, because it really, again, it would be. You'd be getting the direct sound and then the delayed sound, so that happens even if the walls are further. So regardless, if you're doubling something, it's probably not going to make it sound more up front. Not sure how that works with electric guitars, because that makes them sound bigger, but it also might make them sound less present. You know, it's like they're farther away but bigger. I don't know. You know, you can go into all this for a long time, but suffice it to say the chorus is pushing the sound back, and the fact that the rate, it's modulating the time of these reflections, we're getting that comb filtered washy sound. So that's how that's happening. There is 6-voice polyphony. I can demonstrate. It's a lot of fingers. I'm using Machine as a MIDI controller right now, but you can hear I hit that 7th note and the bottom drops out. So that's how we figure out polyphony. It's at 6. Chorus, rate, and mix are at 12 o'clock. The volume, I had to play with it, but we finally nailed it. The FM was higher than I thought. If we listen in the 4th octave, it's fine. I had it down here at around 10 o'clock. And then the volume turned up. I guess now it's pretty obvious that that's not what it was. But it's really obvious when you go a lower octave. Again, when you do these patches, it's sort of like drawing. You're first going to draw broad geometric shapes, ovals, squares, very light, just to kind of give yourself your perspective and angle. And the real drawing happens, not that I'm an artist, but what I have found in the brief book, the few pages I read in that book, how to draw in 30 days or whatever, drawing is all in the shading. And I think synthesis or songwriting or production is the same. You know, even when I watched a Dr. Luke, like behind the scenes in the studio thing, he had this full track, sounded like garbage, but he already had the singer working on it, you know. But you listen to his productions, like I think he did Dark Horse from Katy Perry. Obviously, he's done a ton of things. His productions are very detailed, but the track did not start like that. You know, all those little ear candy layers and stuff. So that's kind of the way you're going to approach designing your sounds. Broad strokes and then dial it in. And actually, the only reason I knew it was polyphony, because I'm not ordinarily playing chords for these patches, so many of them are monophonic, why even do it, is when I retrigger the note, hear how it gets all phasey, even more phasey. Because again, we're getting copies added, and that's always going to phase. So, unless, you know, perfect timing in phase, but more than likely it's going to phase. And I was like, oh, maybe the start button is off. But no, it ended up being the polyphony. So another thing to consider, you know, you can use that to your advantage, or it might not work to your advantage. So keep in mind when designing patches, do you want them to be polyphonic even when retriggering a single note, or do you not? Because then you'll end up with that kind of effect. And if you put it back to mono, you know, which do you want? Something to consider. Let's get a hint. This is going to be the final patch. Looks like I nailed it. Yeah! All right, let me see what else Joe has to say. Okay, that's that. Over to you, Mike. Okay, so hopefully that was helpful. Definitely try these techniques on your own. Be sure to use a subtractive synth. Don't be going to FM8 or another dedicated FM synth, because it might confuse you right now. You can do that later, and believe me, they'll be waiting. So just master subtractive synthesis for now. People tend to go for analog and virtual analog for warm, fat, unpredictable sounds, and FM for very clean, digital, or extremely noisy, inharmonic sounds. That might be an oversimplification, but hey, I'm learning too, so let me know what you think in the comments. Thanks for watching. I'm Hexpa. Peace.